Okay. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Heather Sloan, and I am the director of our Post-Adoption Connection Center here at Nightlight, offering support to our families after placements have happened. So we've been doing this series on difficult behaviors, addressing many different things that you might be experiencing as a parent. So if you've missed other ones that we've done, I invite you to check out our YouTube channel. We have a playlist for the Post-Adoption Connection Center that has all of these webinars. And this one will be uploaded as well in about, the next week or so for you to watch again or to share with a spouse, share with a family member, maybe that's trying to understand your child. If something connects really well with you and what you're experiencing today, then you can share that with them. So today we're talking about handling manipulation, which can look a lot of different ways. And we'll try to unpack some of that as we go forward today. So our objectives is to understand how trauma and fear is driving your child toward these manipulative behaviors. Want to learn what parents can do to address these behaviors and discuss responses to various manipulative behaviors. Because there isn't certainly one thing that is manipulation or feels manipulative. It is lots of different things that your kids are doing, and that's the way that it feels and is occurring with you. Okay, so what is manipulation? I liked this definition of influencing someone unfairly to get what they want or to avoid consequences. I think that word unfairly really jumps out at me because this is where our feelings get involved as parents, right? That it feels unjust to us what our child is doing. We're feeling controlled by them, by their behavior, by their emotions, by their words. We feel like someone is acting unfairly toward us. And that's where our offenses come up, where our challenge really comes up with these behaviors and where it's pushing buttons, because in a lot of ways it's crossing our own boundaries, right, in an unfair way. So I thought that was a really good use of the word in the definition that I was looking up. And for us to keep in mind as we go through this presentation today, because we are trying to understand the behavior of our children and how that is affecting us and affecting our family and what we can do to handle it. Their manipulative behaviors can be intentional or even unintentional. And we'll talk about why some of that is unintentional, especially when we're feeling controlled and we're feeling unfairly attacked by our child's behavior. It feels very intentional that this is something my child is doing because they want to come at me. They want to control me, right? And we think that it is very intentional, but a lot of this can be unintentional. For me, that sounds a bit like a survival skill, right? So if we've adopted internationally, adopted older kids that have difficult behaviors and difficult and traumatic histories, then some of their behaviors and what's going on in your home, it is certainly a manipulative behavior, but it's a learned manipulative behavior from maybe how they had to navigate life before coming into your home. And so even though you are healthy and loving and secure and caring, they are still operating in the dysregulation and in the difficulties in their past. And so some of their continued over behaviors from their history is really in a lot of ways unintentional because they need to relearn how to operate within a relationship that is one they can trust and one they can attach to when they haven't had that before, right? So why is this happening, right? Their fear, their insecurity, and their out of control feelings are being triggered. If you've done a webinar with me before, you've heard that that little line of three things. I say it a lot because that is, and not just with our adopted kids, but this is everyone, right? This is our human behavioral responses, especially our negative ones, are stemming from the things we are afraid of, the things we feel insecure about, or when we ourselves feel out of control or feel like we're being controlled by somebody. And that is what goes off in all of us. In our kids with more traumatic histories, that's more easily triggered. It's more easily set off. Their fears are bigger. Their insecurities are bigger. Their susceptibility to feeling out of control is bigger than maybe us that grew up in a healthier household. So that's why this is happening. Everything that they are doing is stemming back to their insecurity and how they feel out of control. Maybe they want attention, or they need help, but they don't have a healthy way of asking for help. They don't know how to rely on you, right? That fear is triggered. They are afraid that you're not going to help them, you're going to hurt them, or they're going to ask for help and be rejected. They feel insecure maybe about their place in your family. Maybe they're newer in your home, or even if they've been there for a while and they haven't fully settled in. And so they feel insecure in the family. So then they're doing things to try to make relationships happen or to make people do what they want them to do without just being able to voice those needs in a healthy way. This might happen because the child feels like they don't have choices or they don't have control, right? So this is that's stemming back to feeling fearful, feeling out of control. Maybe they're seeking more autonomy. I was talking with a family recently that was really struggling with their 12-year-old, where developmentally they were at an age to start seeking more autonomy as they started to move into those teenage years. You know, kids slowly start to kind of peel away from the parents, doing more and more things by themselves, slowly gaining more independence. But the child's trauma history really kept them back in like a 5-year-old developmental age. So, and really what the child was able to do was at a much younger level than a typical 12-year-old. So they were competing with the child's developmental age and their chronological age, wanting to seek more autonomy. But realistically, that can't happen yet because of the developmental struggles that's going on. So that really being a challenge. So children can become very manipulative, or use manipulative behaviors to try to get that independence and autonomy that they're seeking when those boundaries are being set up to prevent that from happening. Another reason the kids do it, it's worked before, right? The behaviors that they've used have been successful with other adults. They've maybe even been successful with you. And so they're going to continue to try to do that. This worked before, so let's keep trying it, right? Okay, so what can you do? Internally, I think it's important to recognize that when your child is operating out of their fear, their insecurity, their out of control feelings, it is probably triggering your own fear, your own insecurity, your own out of control feelings. It's hard. I'm a parent, and there are absolutely behaviors that my children engage in that I can feel so quickly out of control. I don't know what to do. I need my child to stop doing what they're doing. I know I can't force them. I know I can't do these things to get them to comply, but what I'm saying and doing right now isn't working, right? So then I'm afraid if this is happening in public, I start to get a little insecure about what people judging my parenting, right? And then I feel incredibly out of control. And so that could cause me, to try to, what can I do to get my child to comply, to do what I'm asking them to do? So recognizing what your child is doing and their behaviors and what that's triggering inside you internally, right? And being able to be self-aware of how you're feeling can help you better sort through how you need to behave, right? We know our child's behavior is stemming out of what they're feeling in the moment. And a lot of times those feelings are not rational, right? They shouldn't be afraid. You're not harming them. They shouldn't feel insecure. They're in your family. You love them. They shouldn't feel these ways, right? But they are. And the behaviors are stemming out of that, usually in unhealthy and negative ways. So then where is that maybe happening in you, and trying to decide what behaviors you need to use as the adult, as the parent, to make sure that your behavior isn't stemming completely out of your fear, your insecurity, or your feelings of out of control. And are you responding as a parent in a healthy way, and in a way that is, full of love and wise guidance, or are you responding out of your own fear? Always important, right, to see the trauma underneath their behavior. And that's really why I always start these presentations with what is going on, right? And where is this stemming from these kids? Understanding what could they be afraid of right now? How could they feel insecure? Even though it doesn't logically make sense to us, that's what's going on inside their little brains. To remember that this really is generally not an attack on you, but it is really about them, their own needs getting met, their own survival skills, and they are trying to get those needs met in inappropriate ways, and they're going about it the wrong way. And so our job as parents is to step in and to redirect that child into appropriately getting their needs met. We'll talk a little bit, hopefully today, about how you can do that. I want you to be careful to not label your child as manipulative. This is almost always a descriptor I hear from families when I'm asking, tell me about your kid. What are the struggles that you're having? They're so manipulative, right? And I understand why, right? They're acting that way, right? But being able to still separate your child's behavior, your child's trauma from the preciousness of that child, right? They are still in so many ways an innocent child that was harmed in their history. They did not ask for that. They did not deserve what they've been through. They do not deserve the impacts of other people's decisions on those children. They don't deserve the impacts of that. But unfortunately, that's what you're now dealing with, is the impacts of what other people have done to that innocent child. So that child is still in there. And I know it is really hard that these behaviors wear on you and they tear you down. But to try and find hopes and pieces of reminders of the preciousness of that child underneath those behaviors that are feeling manipulative to you. And so watching some of your language, if you are talking about your child and using these words not as their behaviors are this way or they are acting this way, but instead they are this way, right? We want to start to change that language in ourselves, because that can also be a reminder to you that this is their behavior, not who they are. And we can see that separation that still exists for them, even though it feels like all they do is act manipulatively all the time. And do not confuse their needs or their desires to be close with manipulation. So I know sometimes I've been a parent of young children, and as I walked through challenges, let's say in like my child's sleep and my child's neediness and stages where they're very clingy, I so often heard people in that world talking about, oh, your child is manipulating you by crying. And my response is always, no, no, no. My child has a need. They don't know how to let me know about their need unless they cry out, and I can be drawn close to them to help meet their needs. So trying, even though that is kind of an infant example, trying to put that into place, even with your teenagers or the age of kids that you're parenting right now, to not confuse that maybe some of these manipulative behaviors is a cry to be close, a cry to connect, a cry to trust, but they just don't know how to do it in a healthy way. And then what can you do externally? Kind of in your responses to your kids' behavior, and we'll unpack this a little more as we go forward, the kind of some main quick things, responding in a detached way, right? So not in a way where the child is sensing that like we don't care and we're not connected anymore, but that you're not responding in a way that you are taking everything they're doing personally, right? So when we're using tones and trying to explain to them what you're doing is making me feel manipulated, or what you're doing is not appropriate behavior, right? The tone of voice that we're using can be more detached than it is, okay, what you're doing to me right now, this is not okay, right? That's full of my own emotion, versus being able to talk in a very neutral and calm and direct, right? It doesn't always have to be sing-songy and, oh, I'm so glad you're manipulating me today. But it's how do you talk to them in a more neutral kind of tone? You want to be firm, right? Again, there's a difference in direct and firm and angry. So being able to watch that, ask your spouse or somebody else that sees you interact with your child, what do you hear in my tone when I am trying to get a little more serious and direct with my child? Am I going more angry, or am I being firm and direct, and getting some of that input? Sometimes it's hard to see in yourself. We want to be firm, we want to be direct, so they kind of know we mean business, right? But we don't mean angry business. And then we want to respond with compassion, right? Because we can still try to see the precious child inside of them, and that we are responding to their behaviors that are stemming from their trauma. And so that compassion is still coming out for us. I know that you're feeling scared right now, but it is not okay for you to behave in this way. All right, so we're being compassionate, we're being firm, we're being detached in our responses. So just being really self-aware. Where are you responding to them in your own emotional states, which again is understandable. I dip into those emotions with my own children so many times. It's so challenging, right? They're so close to us, and we're trying the very best for them, and they just don't appreciate it. Right? They just aren't responding in ways we need them to. And it's so easy. I mean, of course, our emotions are in it, but what do we need to do to be able to take a breath, to calm down, to regulate ourselves so that we can better meet our child in their dysregulation? If I come to my child dysregulated and they're dysregulated, that's not a recipe for success. So I have to do what I need to do to regulate first before I approach my child. So working on becoming self-aware of what your own dysregulation is in that moment, so you can respond the best way that you can as a parent. We want to set boundaries and hold those boundaries, right? So that's a lot of kids' manipulative behaviors. They can figure out very quickly who are the people that are going to bend the rules, who are the people that I can get away with stuff with, right? So making sure you're not one of them. Now, we want to have compassion with our kids, and maybe sometimes we let them have an extra treat. Maybe sometimes we break the rules because it's appropriate in that setting. But you want to hold those boundaries as best you can, especially if you know certain areas where your child is more prone to grow manipulative. And we want to focus on positive behaviors that they do instead of just the manipulative ones. Okay, so as we're redirecting, as you're teaching, as you're guiding, really giving a lot of praise when your child does something appropriately. You asked me for that food instead of stealing it. That's awesome, bud. I'm so proud of you. I know that's been a challenge for you. I'm so proud of you. Yes, let's get a cookie. And you know what? Let's get 2 cookies just to be excited about you doing that, right? So we're really putting on a lot of praise for those positive behaviors when they're responding to us appropriately. Okay, so what can manipulation look like? I've got a bunch of different words up here on the screen, and then we're going to unpack some of those. Some of these I have done in other presentations, so I am going to direct you back to our YouTube channel if what you're struggling specifically with your child are some of these other behaviors, because some of these I've gone more of a deep dive on. We're going to focus a little bit on triangulation today, because that's not one I've touched on in other webinars, and I think that's a big piece that we can find ourselves in when our children are acting manipulatively. Lying and control battles are 2 webinars that I have done very specifically. So if that is certainly something you're dealing with your child, I would recommend checking out those videos. We see, along with lying can come just exaggeration. So the whole thing isn't a lie, but they're adding some extra details, they're fluffing it up. They're telling a story to a teacher and you're going, that's not what happened. Why are they saying that? Just feeling exploited, that can go a little bit with kind of some of the tantrums and some of the defiance, feeling threats from our children that they're trying to threaten. Well, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to hurt somebody else. And they're threatening that as a way to get what they want, right? Kind of going back to that definition. They are unfairly trying to get what they want or to avoid consequences. So the use of threats can come out pretty frequently. Tantrums, we'll go a little bit more into that here in a moment, and that kind of going along with like the use of emotions. So a tantrum, not in a tantrum is the use of emotions, but then also the use of other kinds of emotions, right? If they're just really crying or whining, as a way to get what they want. And then kind of talking a bit on defiance, where that kind of falls in a little bit to manipulation. Okay. So triangulation, what does this look like? Okay, this can look like an adult that is being misled or misinterprets what's going on with a child. So let's say, kind of to give an example, I'll thread through this a little bit. Let's say there's a child that's waiting to be picked up from an event by their parent, and they're standing outside a little early, waiting for the parent to come. Parent's on the way, child knows the parent is on the way. Parent isn't far away, they're going to be there in a few moments. But the child's out there waiting, and maybe another adult walks by and questions, why are you alone? Where are your parents? And the child they get triggered, right? They're getting put on the spot by somebody. They have to have an answer, right? The easy answer is just like, my mom's on her way. It's easy to say. But these kids can, especially if they recognize somebody who's sympathetic, that, this person's walking up to them with a lot of, where is your mom? Are you okay? They're showing that real sympathetic face to them. This child knows I can maybe get something else out of this. So, oh my gosh, my mom forgot me. I've been waiting for so long. Okay, well, do you know how you're going to get home? Might say the other concerned adult. And the child's like, no, and I don't have any money. I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So then the concerned adult says, well, I can give you some money. Why don't you use this to get home or go, just they're trying to help, right? Or why don't you go get a snack? Why don't you get some food with this? And giving them some money. So then the child goes off, spends the money on whatever. They know that their parent is coming and they come back, the parent's waiting for them. And the parent picks them up and is going, where'd you get these snacks from? What's this? Where'd you get this money from? What happened? What did you tell somebody else? And not understanding it. So that can kind of happen where there's adults that can misinterpret what's happening. The child is intentionally or unintentionally misleading people, right? This is where outright lying can creep in, exaggerating, right? Oh, my mom always forgets me. She's always late when that's really not true. And you're not even late. You're going to be there on time. You just aren't there yet, right? So knowing that like your child is kind of twisting some of this reality and twisting the truth. The child can tell a different story to different people. So again, these interactions, certainly watching out as a two-parent household, is this triangulation happening between you and your spouse? Is this happening with other adults in their lives, teachers, therapists, people at church, neighbors, friends, parents, where whatever adults that are kind of getting involved in this child's life is where this triangulation can take place. So the child could tell two different stories to different people about things that happen. Child exploiting poor communication between parents, especially among spouses, or between the parent and another adult that maybe you just don't communicate that many details with. And so the child knows, hey, this teacher at school doesn't really know what's going on, so I can tell them anything I want because they don't really know. So they are able to recognize when there is poor communication that they can exploit. And then parents that have different experiences or relationships with the child, and the child uses that, right? I see that often where there's a parent that is struggling more with the behaviors of the child than maybe the other one is. Or maybe the child, especially with their attachment issues, maybe the child acts a certain way toward one parent, like toward mom, and they don't act that way toward dad. And so dad's going, she didn't do that with me. I don't know what you're talking about, right? And some of that triangulation that can start to take place, and the child can potentially use that if they sense that the parents aren't believing one another, right? And aren't supporting one another. They aren't a team together with the child's behaviors. So being able to recognize that that's starting to happen between you and your spouse, and how can you get on a better page to, at least as a front to the child, look like you're agreeing with each other, right? In the background, you can go fight about it, I guess. But how do we let the child know, hey, like mom and dad are on the same page. We're both here. And we both feel this way. We both want this to happen. It's not always, oh, you're strict one parent and I'm the loosey-goosey parent. So I'm going to let those rules slide. And then the other parent continues to kind of become the scapegoat for everything in the family from the child. So making sure we're kind of on the same page so the child can't utilize that. I always know this parent's going to say no, but this parent will say yes. I'm always going to go to the yes parent. I did that. I certainly had one parent that was more strict than the other. I knew how to do that, right? And I was doing those in, I'll say, relatively typical and healthy ways that a teenager would try to do, right? Like I want to get an extra treat. I want to go somewhere fun with my friends. My dad was a lot more strict. If I asked him, he'd probably say no, but if I asked mom, she's going to say yes, right? Like I knew how to do that. And that's on such a low level. So of course, these kids figure out how to do that to a more extreme level. So why this is happening, they could be seeking attention, fear of being forgotten, fear of being disconnected. So as a way to get that even negative attention, right? These kids are pulling out behaviors that look very manipulative in order to get that attention in an unhealthy way. To feel control, to feel safe, to feel settled in whatever situation is going on. And sometimes even causing chaos can feel safer to them if that is what they were used to living in. And a safe and secure and simple household and family can actually feel scarier, right? That's a little counterintuitive, but if they are so used to chaos because they know how to either slip in and out of that, to use chaos to distract people away from them, to use chaos as a cover, they will want to continue to cause that in order to actually feel safe. So it's a long process of helping a child. No, this is how you're going to feel safe in our family. It's not by using this manipulation and turning, trying to pit parents against each other, trying to triangulate, that it's, hey, you just have to communicate your needs to us and we're here for you. The other adult then maybe this other adult doesn't understand trauma. And so I think a lot of us have felt that way, even with therapists, right? I hear that from families that I think my child is manipulating the therapist because the therapist is like, I don't know, nothing, they aren't telling me anything's wrong. They say everything's fine. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, parents. And if that therapist is not more trauma informed, if they're not adoption educated and competent, then the child can learn that pretty quickly and know that this is an adult that I could use to manipulate more than another one because they don't understand trauma. So being aware of that and knowing that, hey, if that adult, if it's a teacher, is there a way to help educate, right? Because it's not, I mean, maybe you can get your child to switch to a different class, but maybe that teacher isn't going to understand either. So maybe there's a place to educate them on this is what trauma can do to kids, and this is how my child's acting, and these are the boundaries that we all need to hold together in school and at home. How can we work together to help make that happen? The child might lack a cause and effect thinking. So they may legitimately have not learned that in their younger years when kids are supposed to learn that as toddler babies, even toddlers in preschool. They're learning that cause and effect. When I do this, this is what happens. When I cry out my need, then my parent will come and meet my need, right? If they didn't have that healthy cycle as infants because of their situation, they learned very early on, that is not going to be the connection point for them. It's not going to get what they want, and they have to go about it in a different way. Or they may just really not even understand how their actions impact other people because those lessons just were not learned in a healthy environment before coming into your home. So recognizing that your child just may really lack the ability for this. And so how do we try to reteach and relearn cause and effect? And it might happen if the child's just dysregulated, right? Their shame is triggered, their fear is triggered. So maybe they don't act like this in a normal kind of state of mind. But anytime that they get emotionally dysregulated because of something that happened, then that's where the manipulation can come out. So recognizing that this is also going to be a driver to why your child is acting in this way because they're dysregulated. Right, so what can we do? I want to talk a little preventatively, and then I want to talk a little bit about what you can do during some triangulation, what you can do after, especially if you don't realize a triangulation has happened until after, which often happens, right? That we find out later your child told a story or told somebody that something happened that was just not true, or the person misunderstood it or was misled by that situation. So what can we do preventatively? Again, setting clear boundaries among all of the adults. So, and especially watching for places of sensitivity to triangulation. So meaning, let's say their youth pastor is just like super cool, chill, relaxed, right? And you recognize your child needs structure. They need boundaries. They need that. Then your kid is going to figure out pretty quickly, hey, this is somebody I can get something over on because they're a lot more chill and relaxed and they are on the same page as my parent. So thinking through the adults that have interaction with your children in a more significant way, and how can you communicate clear boundaries so that everyone is on the same page, right? They are not your child's parent, right? And they serve a role, right? The teacher serves an educational role, but still serves a behavioral role, but in the school setting that looks different than it does at home. So some of these boundaries are not transferable, right, to the situation that they're in. Youth pastor is not their parent, coach is not their parent. But looking at what are the boundaries that can be consistent from home to this activity in this other setting so that we're all on the same page. And those coaches know, that teacher knows that, hey, if you hear something from my child or you see them doing something that is unusual or unexpected to you, I'm your first contact. You've got to come back to me and talk through, oh, so-and-so ate this for lunch today. And I like, where did they even get that from? Right. And then you find out they've been taking kids' lunches at school or trying to get, hey, they have found a really sweet friend that they can be manipulative with and steal their snack and their dessert, and that friend will give it to them, right? So they say, oh, my friend gave it to me. But in digging further, we realize there was some manipulation going on in order for that friend to give that dessert over. So that teacher coming back to you immediately saying, hey, this is going on. Then you're going to that child's parent. Hey, I think this is happening. I'm so sorry. But our child, they're working through this. We're working toward a place of healing and them getting to a better place. These are some boundaries that we need to hold. I need you to tell your daughter, no, my mom said my lunch is only for me. I can't give it to anyone else. If I'm not going to eat it, I need to bring it home. Right. And helping them do that with their child to help hold those boundaries. Recognizing those sympathetic faces, right? Who are the people that are going to be a little bit more susceptible and a little less critical of some of the things that they see the child doing and saying. And they're, honestly, I'm probably that sympathetic face, right? That's the social worker in me of like, oh, I want to believe the best and I want to hope for the best and expect the best out of everybody. So I'm probably more easy to get something maybe pulled over my eyes. Maybe not, but just knowing who some of those people are and who are they're well-meaning, they're well-intentioned. In that story earlier, which we'll come back to here in just a moment, that person was well-intentioned, right? Oh, they saw a child that was in need and, oh, how can I help you? What can I do to help? Oh, you need money? Oh, sure. Yeah, here's $10, here's $20 in case something happens or you need to call somebody or you need to figure something out, right? That's well-intentioned, but we need to make sure we're setting up good boundaries and recognizing who those people might be. So even in therapy, right? Like I said earlier, this can happen in therapy. So you may consider different therapy options where the parent is more involved. Okay, so there's dyadic developmental therapies, some attachment focused therapies, specifically TheraPlay. If there's a TheraPlay trained professional in your area, those are some where parents are more involved in the therapy. So those therapists are also going to probably be a little bit better trained with trauma and adoption, but they will involve the parent more so that there isn't kind of wool being pulled over the therapist's eyes, but it's you're able to give kind of both sides of the story, right? And that your child's doing. So it could be the type of therapy or the therapist that your child is seeing. If that's not working, change. It's okay. Not every therapist is made for every person. Everyone has their own lean, their own direction, the way they do their therapy. And so it's okay to change. If you realize one isn't working out, the next one might. Even within the same therapy model, the next one might be better because they might be more informed in the things that are particularly impacting your child. So you want to consider situations where you've seen your child triangulate in order to get out of something, to head something off, to stop a consequence. Or just something they don't want to do, right? So maybe there's a certain group, that they've got an activity or a sport they don't want to be doing anymore, but you really want them to finish the season. And so they'll maybe be going to practice and going, oh, my mom forgot my soccer ball. I can't play today. Oh, my mom forgot my uniform or this happened. And then the coach is thinking, oh, okay, when really the child just stashed it somewhere so they wouldn't have to, right? So again, going down to setting clear boundaries, being on the same team. So if you start to know that these kinds of things are happening, saying, hey, I already talked to your coach today, and I gave your coach an extra uniform so that just in case it gets forgotten or left behind somewhere, they've got one for you, right? So you're kind of getting out ahead of what they were trying to do and showing that you're on the same page with the coach. And this is not a situation where you can triangulate. Okay, so for during and after, if you find out, let's say, a big thing is acting like you already knew, right? So not that you're wanting to like lie to your child, but kind of giving that front of like, oh, we're on the same page. I talked to this person. Oh, they shared with me what happened. Let's say you gave your child lunch and they had a snack, they had a treat before going to their grandparents' house. And then you find out later that they tell grandma, no, I didn't get a treat. I didn't get a lunch today. And grandma refeeds them, right? Because that's what grandparents do. We want children fed. But we're recognizing, okay, this child's doing it as a way to triangulate. And so it becomes, hey, I'm going to remind grandma so that she can help you to remember to check with me before you get a snack at grandma's house, right? Or I talked with grandma and you're going to get a snack with her today, but just one, right? So kind of getting back on that same page. I already know what happened. Grandma told me about that. Whether you knew or you don't know all the details, just trying to show the child that you're on the same page with that other adult that they're trying to triangulate. You can also name the need. right? So helping that child see how their fear or their insecurity may cause them to behave in a certain way. This can be hard for kids, right? Because you might be, oh, I think that you're being really afraid, and they may not be, right? That may not be what's going on. That's kind of what you're wondering, or you might say, I wonder if you're feeling this way, and the child says, no, I'm not, or I don't know how I'm feeling, right? So sometimes that can be hard to do, but I think it's something you can start to do is to name, hey, I think you were feeling really afraid that you weren't going to be able to get enough food today. Maybe, your child has food insecurity and a history of that. I think maybe you were feeling afraid about that. And so you tried to get grandma to give you an extra treat. We always want you to be fed, right? So we always want that to happen. You can always ask mom if you can have something before that happens. But kind of helping them connect the fear, the insecurity, the out of control to their behavior, right? And that can also help with some of that cause and effect thinking growth if their child's really struggling in that area. Trying to address things very directly without blaming them, right? So it's very easy to say, you did this, you lied about that, you manipulated, you did this. But instead, kind of again with that detached, the firm, the compassionate responses. I know last week that you told your coach that you forgot your uniform and that I forgot your uniform. This week, I've given them that same kind of that example I gave earlier, right? And that's said in a way that isn't blaming, is I know you lied to your coach, and I'm not going to let you lie to your coach this week. And so I gave them a uniform. So instead, we're phrasing that as, hey, I know that we've not had uniforms at practice as coaches let me know that. So I let your coach have an extra uniform to have on the side for you if you forget it again, right? Or if it gets forgotten. So kind of communicating in the ways without just saying, I know you lied, I know you manipulated, I know you did this. Because when we put that focus fully and solely on that thing that they're doing wrong, we think we're helping them change, right? We think that we're helping them go, you're right, I was lying and I shouldn't do that anymore, right? That's not really probably what's going to happen. They're going to maybe double down. They're going to try to lie harder. They're going to try to get better at lying next time. So instead, we're kind of subtly giving them that you can't triangulate the situation. I'm a step ahead of you on this without just labeling them as a manipulator, a liar, some of those things that we can do as parents, which is very natural to do. Then you want to allow the natural consequences, right? Another way to kind of build that cause and effect thinking. And this is going to include the natural consequences for the child, but maybe also the adult that is being triangulated. Okay, so like in that example, right, that I gave earlier, this concerned adult gives the child money just to make sure they're helping them, feeling like they're doing something to help. And then maybe that adult, or that adult finds you and is like, well, I gave your child this money, so you need to pay me back, right? But in general, that's somewhat fair, right? But that doesn't help that other adult learn kind of the natural consequences of their own actions and so it's, I'm not going to immediately pay you back. This is something next time, if my child were to do this, then you need to check with me before assuming I'm not coming, assuming something has happened. I'm going to work with my child to earn the money to be able to pay you back. And so that's how your child is getting some natural consequences, but also that other adult is kind of getting some natural consequences, which can maybe sound silly in some of those contexts, but I think it does really make sense, especially if it's an adult that's regularly in your child's life and continues to be falling for some of the things that they're doing or saying. Then where is kind of the natural consequence to help that other adult learn a little bit more about your child? Also help them understand trauma, especially if they're not really listening to you. Oh no, this child's such a sweet angel. I don't know what this parent is talking about. But once they start to kind of see some of the impacts of what's going on with the kid, then maybe they'll start to go, oh, okay, let me understand a little more about trauma. What's going on with this child? So it can be honestly a connecting experience between you and that other adult that is working to support your child and family, but maybe they're just a little misguided and misinformed in themselves. Okay, so a couple of other behaviors that certainly feel manipulative, and are in the way the child's behaving. So lying and exaggerating. What this can look like, they're lying, they're exaggerating things to be able to get attention, right? To look bigger than they are, to look better than they are. adding in a bunch of details to things, completely making up stories so that they feel accepted by whoever they're talking to, so that they can feel a sense of connection to somebody, but that connection isn't truthful, right? It's not genuine. And so they're actually going about it in an unhealthy way. So they need to go learn better and healthy ways to connect with people and to feel that connection back, but they don't know how to do that in a healthy way. They'll lie to get out of trouble, right? We all want to do that. None of us want to get into trouble. We all want to kind of cover up for things when we've made mistakes, right? So there's some natural humanness in that. Even though that's not a good thing, right? There's negative sinful behavior in that, but it's kind of a natural human reaction to things. Most of us, though, have a filter on top of that goes, no, can't lie to your boss. Gotta tell them the truth. A lot of these kids don't have that, and so they're happy to lie, they're happy to exaggerate to avoid shame, to avoid getting in trouble. So recognizing that your child is not a liar, but they are using unhealthy ways to avoid consequences. So addressing that a little bit more head on and seeing that difference there, and that they are capable of learning different behaviors and different ways of handling those situations. They might lie to establish identity, right, and kind of connect with who they are. I've worked with a family before that I think their child was like telling people that one of their parents was a totally different person because that other person matched their race, where in reality, the race of their parents didn't match them. And so, to establish that identity, lying, exaggerating, changing details. Lack of skills to handle conflict, cause and effect thinking is where lying and exaggerating can come out, kind of touched on that. And then if they're dysregulated, they're feeling afraid, they're feeling insecure, then that lying is just going to tumble out of them. So what can you do? As I said, this is one that I did a deep dive on, so I wasn't going to spend too much time talking about this because there's a whole 1 hour presentation you can watch on it if you're really struggling in this area with your child. But a quick summary: calmly addressing directly what the child's behavior is, not asking questions to allow more lying, especially if you know what happened, right? So you don't want to go, oh, what happened at school today? Anything interesting? When like you already know, right? The teacher's already emailed you, you already know what happened. And what are you doing in that? You are simply trying to test your child to see if they will lie. If this is an area your child struggles in, they will go straight to lying. And then you're just going to get upset. It's going to be, oh, here they are lying again, right? And that negative spiral that happens. So instead you go, hey, bud, we need to talk. Your teacher let me know what happened at school today. I know that you stole pencils and books from your friend and threw them outside on the playground, or, whatever it is. We need to talk about this. I need to understand, did something negative happen with this child? Were you acting back at them because they did something to you, right? So you can ask some questions, but recognizing that the more questions you ask opens the door for potentially more lying. So wanting to just really calmly address it. Hey, even if kids are picking on you, they're coming at you, that's not the way to handle it. This is the way that we need to handle it. Next time I need you to go to your teacher and tell them this, or you need to come home and tell me, and then we'll talk about what you need to do, right? Giving them alternatives on how they should be behaving instead of how they behaved, right? And being able to calmly and directly address what happened instead of asking a lot of questions that opens the door for more lying. Utilizing playful engagement. I think this is best with kind of smaller eyes, but if you ask a child something you kind of think that's probably not true, you go, how about that? You took a shower? How come your hair isn't wet? And kind of keeping that tone playful will stop them from going on to the fearful defensive and jumping immediately to lying. But if you kind of keep your tone playful in that first encounter, then they may be more likely to tell you the truth. No, I didn't take a shower. Okay, let's go up and try again. Do you want to use a special soap? Do you want to use my soap? Do you want to use daddy's soap? Do you want to take a shower in our shower tonight for something fun and different, right? So kind of keeping it playful then stops us from ever getting to a point where they are lying and exaggerating. And looking for ways to diffuse that fear, that insecurity, and the control that could be driving that lying underneath it all. Similar with control battles, I do have a webinar specifically on this to go a little deeper in, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this one. What this can look like: ordering people around, significant defiance, no, I'm not doing what you want me to do, physically blocking exit stairs, places where you need to leave the car, either to get in the car or not, or to not have to get out of the car. Rejection of house rules. We see this come up a lot with food issues, sleep issues, and toileting issues. And I explain why in the webinar, but those are very specific places that kids have full control. And so it's a very easy place to see control battles in kids. Looks like fear, anxiety, insecurity, feeling out of control themselves. That's why they're entering into a control battle. They're fighting for control that they don't have. They react emotionally, especially very extreme emotions. They do this because they don't feel like they have a voice. So they're going to fight for what they want because they don't feel like they're being heard or listened to properly. And so they're going to dig in their heels. Or they might be doing this to get attention. And kind of utilizing that control battle that gets that interaction from the parent. Even when it's negative, it's still interaction. And they're just going about it in an unhealthy way. What you can do, watch the webinar. Think about, why does my child feel out of control in this moment? What are they fearful of? What are they insecure about? How can I then recognizing what you can and cannot control in a situation, right? And recognize where you as a parent are maybe feeding into those control battles and making them worse because you're stepping up to the battle. Instead, you need to get out of that battle as fast as you can. And in that webinar, I give a bunch of different ways to kind of get back out of those control battles. Threats. So what this can look like, certainly control tactic. For kids, they know they can threaten to harm themselves or others, and that will get you to stop doing what you're doing or what you're asking them to do, that they're trying to avoid. This can look like threats against your reputation. I'm going to tell people that you're a bad mom. I'm going to tell people you hit me. I'm going to tell people this about you, right? That can be a threat they throw out that would kind of hurt your reputation. Threatening running away. Or threatening not to do something. It's, okay, well, if you do this, then I'm not going to go to school. I'm not going to do this thing that they really do need to be doing. So what can you do? What are they fearful of, out of control, feeling out of control of, or insecure about? What is driving what's happening in this moment? So don't allow yourself to be distracted by the threat. That is exactly why they are doing it. And you could be, the problem could be that you are falling for it. You're falling for the distraction tactic. So stopping, recognizing if there is truly a threat to harm, right, that this is something they're going to follow through on. Of course, safety matters. You need to respond to that appropriately. But there may be a place where you start to recognize they just use this as a threatening tool, right? Which I know is so scary for you as a parent because you don't always know. Is this a threat? Is this something they'll follow through on? Is it something they won't? If we're concerned at all about them following through on anything to harm themselves or to harm someone else, then we do need to take appropriate actions. But we want to also be mindful of where could this potentially becoming a tactic for manipulation if they aren't going to follow through on those threats. Again, I know that's very hard to know the difference. Always err on the side of safety, but being mindful that it could be used as an empty threat, something that they won't actually follow through on. Recognizing if you're threatening them yourself, right? It's so easy to do as parents. If you don't get in the car right now, then no dessert tonight, right? Or no, you don't get to go to your friend's birthday party, even though you're absolutely going to bring them to the birthday party no matter what. But you're just using it to try to see if they can not call your bluff on it, right? And if it can get it to work. So maybe recognizing where maybe you're using threats yourself and your child has figured that out. And so they're repeating that behavior in the home, right? So you always want to make sure you're not doing that. And only talking about removing or stopping something that you are actually able to follow through on. And you actually will follow through on that, right? That I'm trying to, try to think of an example in that, but I was having a hard time with my own child the other day, refusing to put their shoes on for us to be able to go somewhere. And I was like, you know what, I'm fine with not going to this place if they're really going to try to do this control battle with me. So my way of getting out of that was like, okay, well, if you can't put your shoes on, then we can't go. And I walked away. And there was still some back and forth a little bit about it. We eventually put his shoes on, right? But I was truly willing to walk away from the outing that we were going to go on. Because I was like, this is something we gotta dig in on. And it was something I was able to kind of threaten, but I could follow through on it. And my child did that, and so they put on their shoes. And it was more of a natural consequence than it was necessarily a threat, right? Can't leave the house if we don't have shoes on. Can't go anywhere if we don't wear our shoes. But, just as kind of an example there. Yeah. And so kind of working on the focus shouldn't be on not calling their bluff, but maybe even trying to reframe what they're saying. So if they're saying, I'm gonna run away, or I'm gonna tell people you're a terrible mom, then it's not really about calling their bluff. At that point, it's really going, okay, let's talk about this. And I hear you're really upset with what we're talking about, that you're not able to go do this thing, or you're really upset with what we're talking about doing right now. We need to stop and back up when you talk about that. And not just trying to like, okay, fine, do it. Let's see if you'll actually do it, right? As a way to respond to that, but to go, okay, hold on, let's stop. Let's regulate. Let's give me a minute to try to figure out what's going on behind this behavior with my child and try to address the real need that's underneath everything. Do you not want to go to this event because you just don't want to go? Like, I thought you wanted to go, but maybe if that's really what's going on, you don't have to go. So let's talk about that, right? And kind of redirecting them or reframing what's really going on. Tantrums and emotions. Right, so what this kind of looks like, meltdowns when they're told no or asked to do something they don't want to do, using extreme emotions. So that can be, again, not just angry, screaming, yelling, flailing their body kind of tantrums, but, turning on the tears, kind of taking up other types of emotions as well as a way to manipulate, get out of something, or get to do something that they don't want to do. That can even look like being sugary sweet about something and trying to talk you into it. It doesn't always have to always look like a super negative emotion that's coming out of them. So recognize that this can happen in even older children, right? That these tantrums can happen in teenagers, these can happen in older kids. It's not just a toddler tantrum that we're talking about here, especially if your kids have a difficult history where they're very delayed in some of these emotional and cognitive developmental levels. And trying to recognize and see that they are not, that they're just mad. They're not necessarily just doing it to get what they want, right? I always hear that from parents. They're just being manipulative with that behavior. Okay, yes, they are using behaviors that can manipulate, but ultimately they're just mad. Like they don't feel good about what you're saying to them. They wanted to eat the sugary cereal and you said no, and they are mad about that. That's normal. I'm mad if I don't get to eat something tasty I wanted to eat that day and had my heart set on, right? I'm an adult that's a little more mature and I can handle those feelings of anger and upset in a lot healthier of a way. But in our kids that really don't have the emotional maturity capacity and developmental level to really handle the big emotions that are coming out of them, then it turns into a meltdown. It turns into a tantrum. It turns into, what can I do to get this? Because I'm just mad about it, right? And so again, that takes some reframing for you as a parent to not just be like, look at them manipulating me again, but instead it's yeah, my kid's mad. All right, how do I sit with them in those emotions, right? Still can't get the sugary cereal. Oh, I know you're so mad about that. Let's work on calming down. And then when they're calm, saying, hey, I know we can't have that today, but do you want something else? Let's give some choices about something else that you might want to eat. Do you want to help me make breakfast? Do you want to help me get your stuff ready? Do you want to sit over in that chair like a little princess and I'll just wait on you and bring your food, right? Kind of turn it back into something playful to try to help them through them being mad about something that they wanted to not get. Couple of YouTube videos that I've done that could be helpful in this area, depending on what you're experiencing with them in tantrums and emotions. I have one on de-escalating children when they start to become aggressive. So that's physical as well as verbal aggression. So if those tantrums, especially in bigger kids with bigger bodies, is looking more like aggression, tantrums kind of look like a toddler throwing themselves on the ground. But ultimately, some of what's happening with your teenager is still a tantrum. So that is a good webinar for you, and My Effective Discipline could also help potentially just kind of give you alternative ways of handling the tantrums and the emotional outbursts that your child is using as a way to unfairly get what they want or unfairly avoid consequences. Wanting to redirect these kids into what's the positive behavior, giving them an option to redo. Hey, you threw something across the ground. You threw that toy when I told you you couldn't go to your friend's house, then, hey, let's try that again. How can you respond better when I say, hey, we aren't able to go to the park today. We're not able to go to your friend's house. How can we respond a little bit better? Kind of giving them an opportunity for a redo, giving them choices like I gave in that breakfast example. Hey, we can't have that super sugary cereal that you want to have today, but you can have all these other options. Do you want eggs? Do you want me to make, these muffins that maybe are not as sugary, right? We're trying to stop the sugary cereal, but kind of giving them some choices. What do you want to do? Do you want to help me make it, or do you want to sit there? Maybe we can pull the stool over and you can just watch me and you tell me what to do, or I'll set something up and you dump it all in a bowl. Just trying to come up with different ways for them to regain some control in that breakfast decision, even when they're upset about what they can't have. Okay, and then our last slide here, we kind of come to the end of our time. So this could look a little bit more like defiance, right? So some of this category falls a little bit, I think, into some of these other YouTube videos that I have listed here with de-escalation and effective discipline. So I think if you're really seeing a lot of manipulation through the defiance of your child, those might be some good webinars to follow up on as well. But this could look like child saying no, refusing to participate in somewhere they need to go, school, church, an activity, something they usually like to do, like sport, but that day they don't want to. So they're just really digging their heels in. This creates opportunities for those emotions and that defiance to really escalate. So that's where some of the de-escalation video could be helpful for you if that's what you're really seeing as the manipulation of your child, of them growing into a bigger and bigger tantrum, is the way that they're trying to get what they want from you. And that's starting kind of with that defiance and saying no, or breaking the rules, intentionally going against the rules and then lying about it later to get out of it, right? And this is kind of the pattern you're seeing them in, and that's starting to get worse and worse. Extreme reactions to simple requests, right? That what you're asking them to do is even something that you think that they would want to do, but for whatever reason that moment, they are not into it. So they're throwing up defiance, throwing up saying no. Or this could look like control battles. So again, that's another webinar that you can take a look at. So what you can do, again, always recognizing what's the fear, what's the insecurity, what is the feelings out of control that maybe your child is responding to right now. Are they refusing to go to that activity because something happened the last time they were there, or they've been trying to make friends and it's just not really happening, and so they don't want to go anymore, but they don't have the trust to be able to say, hey, mom, I don't really like those kids. Those kids don't like me, right? That's hard for anybody to say. I'm feeling rejected, right, by them. And so I don't really want to go to soccer anymore. I don't want to be a part of that. So instead, they're going to just refuse to go. They're going to throw tantrums. They're going to do things to distract you away, to maybe you're like, fine, then you can go to soccer today at all. And they're like, great, that's what I wanted, right? So digging into where could this be coming from? Are they feeling insecure and shameful about their soccer abilities? They're not as good at the sport as they thought they were going to be. These kids are very susceptible to shame. And so is that where some of the refusal is coming from? Or they just want to keep playing their video game, and so they're refusing. And so how can you work that out? Hey, we can bring the handheld video game in the car and you can continue playing until we get to the soccer field, and then you're done. And then as soon as we get home, you can start playing again, right? But if you're able to look deeper into why are they being defiant in this moment, then you can work at meeting the need that's going on underneath everything and not being distracted by the defiant behavior that's feeling manipulative. And something in some of the reading and research I was doing for this, another thought in this is, if you're asking your child a question, you're asking them to do something, you're giving them some choices. Sometimes that fear center can get really triggered, right? They feel overwhelmed by this question that's coming at me. I don't know how to answer it. I don't know how my parent wants me to answer it. I don't know what to say. So they kind of pause, right? And then we go, come on, tell me, what do you want to do? Hey, why aren't you going? I asked you to go do this. Why aren't you moving? Right. And we start jumping on them where their fear center is already triggered. And then we're piling on that by our reactions. And so giving them some space, right? So if you ask them something that they're kind of outright, they're looking to say no first, okay, hold on, bud, let's take a minute, or just kind of even in silence, kind of sitting there with them for a second to see if they can process it a little bit faster, or process it in the time they're going to process it. And that maybe some of their defiance came because they weren't being given enough time to process. Their brain just moves a little bit slower through some of the things you're giving them. And so by pushing them is actually causing bigger defiance than if you give them a little bit of space with something. Hey, why don't you think about it? I'll come back. Hey, buddy, we need to go run some errands today. We got to go here and here. Think about which place you'd want to go first, and I'll come back and talk to you about it. Right? So giving them some space to think through their answers without feeling that pressure to answer instantly that maybe their brain isn't capable of doing. And so that fear center gets triggered when they're being stared at, expecting a quick answer or to move quickly, and they're just not able to do that. So then they jump to defiance and manipulation to get out of it, to avoid, to distract, right? So hopefully that's kind of making some connections there. We'll wrap up here with this slide. These are some books that I really like, especially if you're dealing with a lot of the issues that I've been talking about in these webinars. These are resources I go to frequently for some of the major stuff that we see. I also want to highlight our coaching program. It is 4 weeks of giving support to you as a family, meeting with one of our coaches on a weekly or biweekly or more than once weekly basis. During that time to really hone in and focus